Alara traced the condensation on her bedroom window, her breath fogging the glass in soft clouds. Outside, the familiar oak tree, her silent confidant of 10 years, swayed gently in the autumn breeze. Its leaves, a riot of golds and russets, seemed to mirror the turmoil in her own heart. Tomorrow, they were leaving everything. Her best friend, Lily, with whom she'd shared countless secrets under the very oak tree. Her cozy room, filled with the scent of old books and crayon wax. Her school, where Mrs. Gable's kind smile always made math a little less intimidating. And all because of a promotion, a word that tasted like ash in her mouth, even though her parents spoke it with bright, hopeful eyes. Her father, a quiet man with calloused hands and a deep love for the earth, had been offered a supervisory position at a large agricultural research facility. Her mother, a brilliant botanist who could coax life from the most stubborn seeds, had been invited to lead a new experimental greenhouse project. "It's a wonderful opportunity, sweetheart," her mother had said, her voice laced with an excitement Alara couldn't share. A fresh start, a new adventure. But all Alara could see was the end of her current adventure, a chapter closing before she was ready to turn the page. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, a silent tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. The shifting sands of home were terrifying. The journey was a blur of highway signs and packed boxes. Their new house, though spacious and filled with sunlight, felt empty, echoing with the ghosts of their old life. Alara tried to focus on the positives, as her mother gently encouraged. A bigger backyard for her dog Buster, a playful golden retriever who seemed to take to the new surroundings with an infectious enthusiasm. A room with a window seat, perfect for reading. But every newness felt like a fresh wound. The first few days were spent unpacking, the rhythm of her parents' movements a comforting constant amidst the chaos. Her father, usually reserved, hummed old folk songs as he carried boxes, his shoulders broad and reassuring. Her mother, ever practical, organized their new kitchen with swift efficiency, the scent of lavender and lemon wafting from her cleaning supplies. Alara tried to help, but her movements felt sluggish, her mind still back in her old life. She missed Lily's easy conversation, the familiar creak of her old school's wooden floors. The new horizon, though painted with the promise of opportunity for her parents, loomed before Alara like an unscalable mountain. The morning of her first day at Northwood Elementary School dawned gray and damp, mirroring the heavy feeling in Alara's stomach. She chose her favorite blue dress, hoping it would bring her some comfort, but even the soft fabric felt alien against her skin. Her parents, sensing her anxiety, offered extra hugs and words of encouragement. "You'll do great, sweetie," her father murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Just be yourself." Her mother adjusted her backpack, a worried crease forming between her brows. "Remember, we're always here for you." Alara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. The school building, a sprawling brick structure, seemed to stare down at her with 1,000 windows. The playground, bustling with unfamiliar faces and boisterous laughter, felt like a foreign country. She clutched Buster's worn stuffed animal, tucked deep inside her backpack, a small talisman against the unknown. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The first day dread was a cold, unwelcome companion. Stepping into the classroom was like entering a vibrant, chaotic painting. Children's voices, loud and confident, filled the air. Desks were arranged in cheerful clusters, colorful posters adorned the walls, and the scent of crayons and construction paper hung heavy. Alara stood awkwardly at the doorway, a small island in a sea of strangers. Her new teacher, Miss Albright, a tall woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper bob haircut, greeted her with a perfunctory smile. "Class, this is Alara. Please make her feel welcome." A few polite nods, a couple of curious stares, and then the flurry of activity resumed. Alara was directed to an empty desk at the back, next to a boy with perpetually messy hair who seemed engrossed in drawing fantastical creatures. She tried to make herself small, to disappear into the anonymity of the classroom. During recess, she hovered at the edges of games, feeling like an outsider peering in. The laughter, the shouts, the easy camaraderie of the other children all felt like a language she didn't speak. A sea of strangers, and Alara adrift. The first few weeks at Northwood were a lonely struggle. Alara tried to make friends, offering shy smiles and tentative greetings, but the established cliques were hard to penetrate. She ate lunch alone, her sandwich tasting like sawdust, while other children chattered animatedly around her. She missed Lily's easy conversation, the familiar creak of her old school's wooden floors. The new horizon, though painted with the promise of opportunity for her parents, loomed before Alara like an unscalable mountain. Academically, she found the curriculum slightly different, and catching up felt like an uphill battle. Miss Albright, while efficient, lacked the warmth of Mrs. Gable. Her corrections were often blunt, her praise sparse. Alara found herself avoiding eye contact, shrinking under her gaze. At home, she tried to put on a bright face for her parents, answering their questions about school with vague fines and okays. But at night, curled up with Buster, she would whisper her worries into his soft fur, the unspoken worries growing larger in the dark. The whispers of loneliness and the worries of fitting in became her constant companions. One crisp Tuesday morning, as the leaves outside the classroom window danced in the sunlight, Miss Albright made an announcement that sent a ripple of excitement through the class. "Children," she began, her voice cutting through the usual morning buzz. "Next Friday is our annual Career Day. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to explore different professions and think about what you might want to be when you grow up." A collective murmur of anticipation spread. "And," Miss Albright continued, a slight smirk playing on her lips, "as is tradition, you are all encouraged to come dressed as the profession of one of your parents. Be creative, have fun." The room erupted in excited chatter. Children immediately began brainstorming, visions of doctors, firefighters, astronauts, and artists filling the air. Alara, however, felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. Her parents' jobs were different. Agricultural research, botany. How was she supposed to dress as that? The Career Day announcement, a source of joy for others, brought a fresh wave of anxiety for Alara. That evening, Alara sat at the dinner table, pushing around her peas with her fork. Her parents, oblivious to her internal struggle, chatted happily about their day. "The new greenhouse is coming along beautifully," her mother said, her eyes sparkling. "And the yield from the experimental corn varieties is incredibly promising," her father added, a quiet pride in his voice. Finally, Alara gathered her courage. "Mom, Dad," she began, her voice small, "we have Career Day next Friday. We have to dress up as what you do." Her parents looked at each other, then back at her, puzzled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," her mother exclaimed. "What are you thinking of wearing?" Alara hesitated. I don't know." She imagined herself in a lab coat holding a small plant compared to the elaborate costumes her classmates would surely create. The thought filled her with a profound sense of discomfort. She felt the seeds of inadequacy beginning to sprout within her. For the next few days, the costume conundrum consumed Alara. Her mother, ever supportive, suggested she could wear a miniature lab coat and carry a magnifying glass, perhaps even a small potted plant. "You could be a brilliant botanist, just like me," she said, trying to infuse Alara with enthusiasm. Her father suggested she could wear work boots and a sturdy shirt, like a field researcher. "You could show them how we help grow the food that feeds the world," he offered, his voice gentle. But Alara pictured the other children. Sarah, whose father was a pilot, would likely come in a crisp uniform. Michael, whose mother was a veterinarian, would probably have a cute toy animal and a stethoscope. Her ideas, though accurate, felt boring, uninspiring. She didn't want to explain complex agricultural science to her classmates. She just wanted to fit in, to be like everyone else. The costume conundrum weighed heavily on her young shoulders, an unwelcome burden. The morning of career day arrived, cloaked in a tense silence at Alara's home. Alara stood before the mirror, dressed in a small, slightly oversized white lab coat that her mother had found for her. Her father's old, well-worn gardening gloves hung from her belt, and in her hand she clutched a small, healthy fern in a tiny pot. She looked at her reflection, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She felt silly, conspicuous. Her parents, sensing her apprehension, offered a flurry of reassurances. "You look absolutely wonderful, sweetie," her mother insisted, adjusting the collar of the lab coat. "You represent something truly important," her father added, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. They meant well, Alara knew, but their words did little to soothe her churning insides. As they drove to school, Alara watched the other children walking with their parents, their costumes vibrant and exciting. A tiny astronaut waved from a car window. A miniature doctor, complete with a plastic stethoscope, skipped ahead. The day had arrived, and with it a fresh wave of fear. The classroom was a riot of color and costumes. Superheroes rubbed shoulders with tiny chefs, pint-sized police officers saluted miniature artists. Alara walked in, her fern clutched tightly, and immediately felt her cheeks flush with heat. She saw the glances, the whispers, the barely concealed amusement. Miss Albright, standing at the front of the room, surveyed the scene with a critical eye. "Excellent, children, excellent. Now, let's go around the room and you can all tell us about your chosen profession." The presentations began, each child confidently explaining their parents' exciting job. Ilara's turn drew nearer, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the weight of every curious gaze, every stifled giggle. The unveiling of her costume and her parents' professions felt like an impending public execution. "Ilara," Miss Albright called, her voice pulling Alara from her anxious thoughts. "Your turn." Ilara walked to the front of the class, her legs feeling like jelly. She held up the fern, her voice barely a whisper. "My parents are agricultural researchers and botanists." She tried to explain what that meant, how they helped plants grow, how they discovered new ways to feed people. But her words felt clumsy, inadequate. Then it happened. A small snicker from the back of the room, another, and then a ripple of laughter. Miss Albright, instead of quelling it, allowed a slow, dismissive smile to spread across her face. "So," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "so your parents play in the dirt and talk to plants?" More laughter erupted, louder this time. Ilara felt her face burn, hot tears pricking at her eyes. The laughter, sharp and cruel, pierced through her, leaving her feeling exposed and humiliated. The laughter, once a ripple, became a wave, washing over Alara and drowning her in shame. She looked at Miss Albright, expecting intervention, a calming word, but the teacher's eyes, usually so sharp, now held a glint of amusement, almost of contempt. "Well, Ilara," Miss Albright continued, her voice still laced with a mocking tone, "that's certainly unique. Perhaps next year you could consider a more established profession for your parents, something a bit more exciting for career day, wouldn't you say?" The words, more than the laughter, cut Ilara to the quick. They implied her parents' work was somehow less valuable, less important, less worthy of respect. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, spilled down her cheeks. She stood there, trembling, the small fern shaking in her hand, while the cruel mockery of her teacher and classmates echoed in the room. Ilara ran from the classroom, the sound of her own ragged sobs echoing in her ears. She found refuge in the deserted girls' restroom, locking herself in a stall, her body shaking uncontrollably. She buried her face in her hands. The image of Miss Albright's sneering face burned into her mind. The laughter, the mockery, the sheer humiliation, it all crashed down on her. Her parents, who worked so hard, who were so passionate about their contributions to the world, had been dismissed and ridiculed, and by extension, so had she. All the loneliness, all the anxieties of the new school, all the unspoken fears of not fitting in coalesced into a crushing weight. Her spirit, already fragile, felt utterly broken. She wished she could disappear, cease to exist. The world outside the stall door seemed too harsh, too cruel to face. The school day ended in a blur of tears and a throbbing headache. Ilara walked home in a daze, Buster's comforting presence the only anchor in her swirling emotions. She tried to compose herself, to hide the raw pain, but her red-rimmed eyes and puffy face betrayed her. When her mother greeted her at the door, her usual bright smile faltered. "Ilara, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Ilara shook her head, unable to speak, the memory of Miss Albright's sneering face still stinging. Her mother followed her, her footsteps soft and hesitant. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand gently stroking Ilara's hair. "Sweetheart, please tell me what happened." The words were an effort, choked with sobs. "Career day. Miss Albright. She laughed. She said my parents' jobs were silly." The unbearable silence that followed was filled only with Ilara's quiet weeping and her mother's deepening horror. Ilara's mother, initially stunned, felt a slow, simmering anger begin to ignite within her. She listened to Ilara's fragmented account, each word a fresh stab to her heart. Her daughter, her sensitive, intelligent daughter, had been publicly humiliated by a teacher, a person entrusted with her care and education. She remembered Ilara's reluctance about career day, the quiet doubts she'd tried to dismiss. Now she understood the depth of her daughter's fear. When her father returned home, his usual calm demeanor was shattered by the news. His face, usually placid, contorted with a mixture of disbelief and searing rage. She laughed at Ilara? At our work? At our daughter? The injustice of it, the sheer cruelty, fueled a parent's primal fury. This was not just about a bad day at school. This was about a deliberate act of unkindness that had deeply wounded their child. Ilara's father, a man of quiet strength and unwavering integrity, felt a resolve solidify within him. He held his daughter close, smoothing her hair, his own pain mirroring hers. "No one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "no one makes my daughter cry for fun. No one mocks what we do, what we believe in." His wife, her own anger blazing, nodded fiercely. "This is unacceptable. This goes beyond poor teaching. This is emotional abuse." Together, they made a silent vow of vindication. They would not let this stand. They would fight for Ilara, not just for her immediate hurt, but to ensure that no other child suffered at the hands of such a cruel and unprofessional educator. Their quiet home, usually a haven of calm, now hummed with the electric energy of righteous indignation. The vow of vindication was a promise etched in stone. The next morning, Ilara's parents arrived at Northwood Elementary, their faces grim, their resolve unwavering. They bypassed the front office, heading directly to Miss Albright's classroom. The sight of their daughter's tear-streaked face was burned into their minds. Miss Albright, caught off guard, looked up from her desk, her expression shifting from surprise to a faint annoyance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dismissive. Ilara's father, usually so mild-mannered, spoke with a controlled fury that sent a shiver down his wife's spine. "We are Ilara's parents, and we are here to discuss your behavior yesterday during career day." Miss Albright's eyes narrowed. She attempted to brush them off, to downplay the incident. "Children can be sensitive," she began, a condescending tone in her voice. But Ilara's mother cut her off, her voice sharp and clear. "My daughter was humiliated, mocked by you in front of her entire class, and that is not acceptable." The confrontation was direct, unyielding, and filled with the righteous anger of two parents defending their child. The confrontation quickly escalated. Miss Albright, growing increasingly defensive and arrogant, refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. She even had the audacity to suggest Alara was overly sensitive and her parents were overreacting. This only fueled the parents' determination. They demanded a meeting with the principal, then the superintendent. They meticulously documented everything Alara had told them, recalling every painful detail. They researched school policies, legal precedents for emotional distress and professional misconduct. Their anger, channeled into action, became a formidable force. They were not just seeking an apology, they were seeking accountability. They initiated formal complaints, citing not only Miss Albright's unprofessionalism, but also her pattern of behavior that had, according to other parents they discreetly contacted, caused distress to other students. The wheels of legal action and consequences had begun to turn. The news of the unfolding situation rippled through Northwood Elementary. Parents, who had perhaps quietly endured Miss Albright's harshness for years, began to speak up. Whispers of her cutting remarks, her sarcastic tone, her tendency to belittle children, coalesced into a growing chorus of concern. Other teachers, some privately relieved that someone was finally addressing Miss Albright's behavior, offered quiet support and corroborating anecdotes to the administration. Alara's parents ensured that the focus remained on the well-being of the children, emphasizing the importance of creating a safe and respectful learning environment. The principal, initially hesitant, was forced to take the complaint seriously as the pressure mounted. The ripple effect of Alara's parents' courage exposed a deeper problem, bringing to light the toxic environment Miss Albright had created. Weeks turned into months. The legal actions, though slow, eventually yielded results. Miss Albright, facing overwhelming evidence of professional misconduct and a growing number of complaints, was ultimately dismissed from Northwood Elementary. The school, in an effort to rebuild trust, implemented new sensitivity training for its staff and clearer protocols for addressing student distress. Alara, though still carrying the scars of the experience, slowly began to heal. Her parents, having fought fiercely for her, made sure she knew the depth of their love and pride. They encouraged her to pursue her passions, regardless of what anyone else thought. Alara found a new teacher, a kind woman who genuinely fostered a love of learning. She even made a new friend, a quiet girl who shared her love of books and imaginative stories. The incident had been painful, but it had also shown Alara the power of standing up for what is right and the unwavering strength of her parents' love. It was a new beginning, not just for Alara, but for the school, a testament to the fact that even in the face of cruelty, kindness and justice can ultimately prevail. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire, teach, and entertain. Until next time, bye!